Why Generation X trusts no one. The generation raised in silence. There is a generation that doesn't talk much about what shaped them, not because it didn't matter, but because no one asked. Generation X, born between 1965 and 1980. They don't dominate headlines, they don't trend on TikTok, they don't fight culture wars loudly online, they just exist. But if you look closely, you'll notice something different about them. They're calm during chaos, detached during drama, suspicious of promises that didn't happen by accident. It started with an empty house. Imagine you're 8 years old. You walk home from school. Your backpack feels heavy. You reach your front door. You pull a key from a string around your neck. You unlock it. The house is dark. No voices, no movement. No one asking how your day was. You step inside, close the door, and the silence hits. This wasn't rare. It was routine. Millions of children across America, the UK, parts of Europe, even growing urban centers in India and the Philippines experienced some version of this independence as dual-income households became the norm. You learned quickly, don't panic, don't complain, handle it. You poured cereal yourself. You finished homework alone. You watched the clock, and something subtle happened inside your brain. You stopped expecting immediate comfort. You stopped assuming someone would fix things for you. Psychologically, that builds self-reliance. But it also builds emotional distance. Because if no one is there consistently, you adapt by needing less. Now fast forward. Your parents come home, they're tired, stressed, maybe arguing. You try to explain something that upset you at school. They don't have the bandwidth, handle it. So you do. Over time, you learn something dangerous. Your feelings are secondary to survival. You don't explode. You compress. That compression becomes your personality. Then there's the atmosphere they grew up in, Cold War tension, nuclear drills in classrooms, teachers calmly explaining what to do if the world ends. Imagine being 10 years old, crouched under a desk, practicing for annihilation. Adults said, it's serious. But don't worry. So you learn to hold two conflicting realities. The world might end. But act normal. That psychological contradiction builds detachment. Sarcasm becomes a shield. Irony becomes armor. If you laugh first, nothing surprises you. Then came the betrayal of stability. They were told, work hard, be loyal, life will reward you. Then they watched layoffs sweep through offices. They watched parents who gave 20 years to a company get replaced in a meeting that lasted 10 minutes. They saw divorce reshape families. Security wasn't stable. It was fragile. So Gen X adapted again. Hope quietly, prepare loudly. This is what psychologists might call defensive pessimism. But to them, it's realism. You don't get blindsided if you're already braced for impact. Here's an emotional snapshot. Picture a 14-year-old Gen Xer sitting in their bedroom in 1989. They just heard their dad lost his job. The house feels tense. No one explains what's happening financially. They hear whispers through thin walls. That teenager makes a silent decision. I need to be able to survive on my own. That thought never leaves, even decades later. Even in stable careers, even in healthy marriages, a part of them is always calculating escape. Roots. And then there's privacy. When they embarrassed themselves as teenagers, maybe a few classmates laughed. That was it. The moment ended. Now imagine being raised in a world where mistakes expire, then suddenly living in a world where mistakes are permanent, where everything is documented. Of course they hesitate to overshare. To them, exposure equals risk. They were trained in a world where survival meant keeping things close to the chest. Now let's talk about work. Gen X doesn't post about hustle culture. They just work, paper routes before sunrise. Retail jobs where mistakes meant real consequences. Manual registers where you had to calculate change in your head. Responsibility came early. And when the economy collapsed repeatedly, they didn't act shocked. They adapted. .com crash, 2008 financial crisis, global recessions. Every time stability cracked, it reinforced an old childhood lesson. Nothing is guaranteed, so they diversified multiple skills, side incomes, backup plans, not because they're obsessed with success, because they're allergic to dependence. But here's the darker layer. Self-reliance feels strong until you realize it can isolate you. Many Gen X adults struggle to ask for help, not because they don't have people, because vulnerability feels unnatural. If you survived alone at 8, why would you suddenly depend on someone at 40? So they carry weight silently. They handle emergencies with eerie calm. But sometimes no one notices the pressure building underneath. Now they're raising children in a hyper-connected world, kids with constant supervision, constant validation, constant visibility. Gen X parents often overcorrected. They gave attention they never received. But privately, some of them wonder, did I make it too safe? Because deep down, they know something uncomfortable. Strength came from discomfort. Resilience came from boredom. Depth came from silence. They remember lying on the floor staring at the ceiling. No phone, no distraction, just thoughts. That's where identity forms. In quiet, Generation X is the bridge generation, old enough to remember. A world without the internet. Young enough to build the internet, they understand analog hardship and digital chaos. They don't demand recognition. They don't chase applause. They don't expect institutions to save them, because history taught them something early. You are your own backup plan. They were raised in silence, so they built strength, and they carry it quietly. Even now, this is Mind Sparks, where we don't just talk about psychology, we expose it. If you're ready to heal deeper, think sharper, and understand yourself beyond surface level advice, subscribe, because the next video might explain the pattern you've been stuck in your entire life. Until then, stay aware, stay conscious, and keep sparking your mind.